Ifeatu Melifonwu is the most intriguing cornerback, if not player, in the 2021 NFL draft class. At 6'2", 205 pounds, he doesn't have any of the stiffness that you traditionally see from bigger corners. He's currently projected to go in the late second round, but I think his draft position ranges a lot wider than most players because I could see some teams falling in love with his upside while others might not even like him until day 3. His athletic build and skill set makes him a bit of a unicorn, especially when trying to determine what scheme he fits best in. When I'm evaluating cornerbacks and projecting them to the NFL, I try to picture how their skill set translates to specific defenses, and Melifonwu has elite traits that could make him dominant in a bunch of different schemes, but for each of these schemes, there's usually one specific weakness that makes me hesitate. He has the length of a prototypical press cover 3 corner, but he only had 183 press snaps in his college career, and his press technique is unconventional and definitely needs work. His ability to accelerate and break on routes would fit perfectly in an off-zone system like the Colts or the Rams, but his ability to read routes as they develop is also hit or miss. And his overall length and fluidity would be really valuable in a man-heavy scheme, but his long speed and agility are just okay. What that leaves us with is a player with as many high-end traits as anyone in this class, but whose success will rely heavily on what type of defensive scheme he goes to. The only issue is that I can't pin down exactly what scheme I think he would fit the best in. I love when a player's athletic testing matches up with what they put on film, and Melifonwu is a shining example of this. His vertical jump, broad jump, and 10-yard splits are in the 97th, 98th, and 95th percentiles, and that shows up anytime he breaks on a route from off-man or zone coverage. That combined with the 80th percentile arm length and some great play strength makes Ifeatu Melifonwu an elite cornerback prospect when it comes to playing the ball at the catch point. If the only thing you had to do in football was cover dig routes out of cover 3, Melifonwu would be a consensus number 1 pick. But his pro day numbers also highlight some of his athletic limitations. He doesn't have the best long speed, which is a bit surprising given his explosiveness, so the hope is at the next level that his length can make up for that half of step that he might be lacking. His 3-cone and shuttle numbers aren't very good either, but for a 6'2" corner, they could be a lot worse, and his ability to flip his hips and move laterally is actually pretty good on tape. Melifonwu graded out fairly well for PFF over the course of his career, earning the 26th highest grade among cornerbacks for the 2020 season. His grading was also pretty consistent between man and zone coverage, which you like to see. He lined up almost exclusively on the outside for Syracuse, only playing 6 snaps in the slot last year. And I think statistics are extremely overrated, especially for cornerbacks, but I've included a few here if you're interested. So in man coverage, Melifonwu has some of the best mirroring ability I've seen for a corner of his size. His athleticism makes him an effective pattern match corner, and he uses his length and explosiveness to make a lot of plays at the catch point. But he'll need to continue to improve his balance and weight distribution to succeed in man coverage in the NFL. Looking at this play against UNC, Syracuse is an off cover 1 buzz. Buzz meaning the strong safety comes down to either play the strong hook or man up the number 3 receiver. In off man, the outside corners will usually give 7 to 10 yards of cushion, which provides more protection from deep routes, but makes the defense more vulnerable to slants and hitches. So to make up for this vulnerability, corners in off man utilize what's called a flat foot read. In this technique, a corner will not fully commit to his back pedal until he knows that the receiver isn't running a quick route to the inside. He'll either read the wideout's initial steps or he'll look at the quarterback's drop and his eyes. If the quarterback goes into a quick 3-step drop, the corner knows that a slant or a hitch is most likely coming. On this play, Melifonwu reads the quarterback's eyes and sees that his first read is to the field side, so he knows that he won't be targeting Dyami Brown on a quick route. With that, he can begin his back pedal, knowing that if Brown were to break inside later, he has help over the middle from the whole defender. Every coach has a different philosophy when it comes to cornerback leverage, especially in single high defenses, but Tony Brown likes his corners to play with outside leverage in cover 1, which you can get away with when you have a free safety with the speed of Andre Sisco. Melifonwu has a habit of opening his hips extremely early when covering deep routes, and I think he does that to make up for potential speed mismatches. This would in theory make him more susceptible to in or out breaking routes, but Melifonwu has the hip fluidity to cover those pretty well. Right here he's an off man against Clemson, and he flips his hips inside to cover the deep route that he's expecting. But when the receiver breaks outside, Melifonwu's able to flip his hips 180 degrees immediately. Cornell Powell runs a terrible route here, but this level of hip fluidity is extremely rare for a 6'2" corner. Going back to the play versus UNC, when Dyami Brown's post route gets covered, he breaks outside and Melifonwu is able to stop, accelerate, and use his length to break up the pass. As I've alluded to, Melifonwu's acceleration is seriously elite, and it shows up in off-man coverage against shorter routes. When he sees a receiver start to sink his hips, he's consistently able to explode forward and disrupt the pass. I also really like his ball skills in these situations, and there's no understating how valuable his length is when trying to break up a pass. But length and explosion alone don't make you good at contesting routes over the middle. It takes a lot of timing and body control to make a play on the ball right as it reaches the receiver without making too much contact or making contact too early. Let's compare this rep by J.C. Horn with another rep by Melifonwu. Both of these corners have great length and ball skills. In fact, those are J.C. Horn's biggest selling points. But a lot of times Horn is too grabby and undisciplined with his hands. The receiver establishes inside position, but he doesn't actually create much separation. But Horn can't help but latch onto the receiver's outside arm and commit what should have been a pass interference. When Melifonwu recognizes the dig route here, he closes the gap a lot more slowly than he actually could. Slow playing the route allows him to reach the catch point with perfect timing. He shields the receiver from the ball with his inside arm while making as little additional contact as possible. Receivers who can't match Melifonwu's length have a really difficult time in contested catch situations. I think of press coverage in terms of two broad categories, hand-driven and foot-driven. In hand-driven press coverage, cornerbacks will prioritize landing a strong jam at the line of scrimmage to force the receiver off his route and disrupt his timing and positioning. In foot-driven press, a corner prioritizes mirroring and maintaining good body position, and the hands are used more after the line of scrimmage. Melifonwu's press technique falls firmly in the foot-driven category. In fact, the first note I made on Melifonwu as a prospect was that he absolutely refuses to use his hands at the line of scrimmage. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, since being too aggressive in press can get you beat deep if you lack high-end speed, but with Melifonwu's size and length, if he could add a nice initial punch to his press technique, I think he'd benefit a lot. He does a great job of keeping his feet active to start out a route, which is the first thing a DB coach will tell a corner to do in press. Stationary feet should be avoided at all costs in press coverage, and Melifonwu has consistent technique in this area. Unless a receiver is immediately breaking inside, a corner's first two steps should be with the outside and inside foot in that order. The point of this is to activate the feet, read the receiver's movement, and force him into a release. But because he doesn't actually disrupt the receiver at the beginning of the play, he's forced to open the gate a lot earlier than cornerbacks traditionally do. With no punch or jam, the receiver essentially has a clean release off the line of scrimmage. There's just somebody in front of him. To make up for this, Melifonwu gives receivers what's called an opposite hand punch once they get into their route. An opposite hand punch should be with the hand opposite of a receiver's release. So if the receiver releases outside, he'll use his inside hand, and vice versa. This serves two purposes. For one, it can physically disrupt a receiver's route, especially if they release outside and he wants to force the receiver to the sideline, but it also gives the cornerback better control of the receiver as he runs his route and creates better leverage to flip his hips if the receiver breaks inside. When Melifonwu loses in press coverage, it's usually a result of a receiver getting an inside release and Melifonwu being unable to cut off his route. This harkens back to my point to start out the video about how he has these high-end traits that are coveted in a lot of different defensive systems, but he usually has one key weakness that would make me hesitant to play him in a given scheme. So in this case, I don't want Melifonwu in press coverage if I'm in cover 2 or cover 4 where there's no help over the middle. When it comes to run defense, Melifonwu is about as good as you'll see at his position. His incredible physicality in the run game makes his lack of physicality in press coverage even more head-scratching, but it also gives me more confidence that he can improve in that area. He doesn't shy away from contact at all, so it's clearly not an issue of Melifonwu being hesitant to be physical or anything. He's so physical in run defense, in fact, that I think he could be a really good safety. But it's not just extreme aggressiveness that allows him to excel in run defense. He's really disciplined when it comes to breaking ball carriers down and avoiding over pursuit, and his size-length combo makes him a lot better at shedding blocks than most cornerbacks. In college, he's the most athletic guy on the field 9 times out of 10, but in the NFL, he won't be as physically dominant. But it's great to see a guy so willing to be physical, and it makes cornerback film, which is notoriously boring, a lot more entertaining to watch. In terms of day one success, I think Ifeatu Melifonwu's best scheme fit is an off cover 3 defense. He'll be able to sit back in zone coverage, squeeze receivers to the sideline, and use his acceleration to break on passes over the middle. So to me, the clear scheme fit is the Carolina Panthers. In 2020, they ran cover 3 more often than any other team, 51.4% of the time, but they only utilized press coverage 29% of the time, which was the 4th lowest rate league-wide. Dante Jackson has been fine, but he's in the final year of his rookie contract. I liked Troy Pride as a prospect, but he had a rough rookie year, and I'm not sure they should be counting on a 4th-round pick at such an important position. And AJ Bouye was a good signing, but he's dealt with injuries, and he isn't a long-term answer. Outside of those 3, you're looking at Rashawn Melvin, Stanley Thomas Oliver, and Miles Hartsfield, so I think they could definitely use some help at corner. I think Carolina could get a day 1 starter who's a perfect scheme fit at a valuable position, and they could potentially get him in the 3rd round, which would free them up to take a tackle with their 1st-round pick. And there's a good chance that Melifonwu improves on a lot of his weaknesses, in which case I think he could be successful about anywhere. Regardless of where he goes, I think Melifonwu's ceiling is the roof, and I'll be very interested to see how he pans out.